Tonight, we drift back through the fog of time, to a place high above the clouds, where the air is thin, the gods are many, and the immortal don't sleep. Mount Olympus, the shining peak of Greek mythology, a realm of deities and divine gossip, of sacred meals and timeless boredom. You may have heard stories of Zeus hurling thunderbolts, of Aphrodite's charms, or Hermes racing through the skies with winged sandals. But those were the tales told for mortals, dramatized and adorned to dazzle human ears. The reality, if one dares to call it that, was slower, quieter, more ritual than revelry, an eternal rhythm of divine chores, passive feuds, and celestial bureaucracy, a place where time stands still, but duties never end. In this gently winding journey, we'll explore the many layers of life on Olympus. We'll meet gods whose tasks never change, witness rivalries that last centuries, and consider what it truly means to be divine and bored. But before we meet the immortals, we begin with you. Imagine yourself waking on Olympus, if only for a night. The air is crisp at this height, not cold, but oddly untouched. There is no breeze on Mount Olympus, no clouds passing by, just the long, humming stillness of eternity, and you are new. You are not a god, not yet, but you've been chosen to serve. Perhaps you were mortal once, and for reasons unknown, a heroic deed, a favor owed, a myth not yet written. You have been brought to Olympus to serve as cupbearer to the gods. Your task seems simple enough. Pour nectar, the divine drink, into golden goblets. Said be ambrosia, the food of immortality, with steady hands and downcast eyes. But here, on this mountain of endless days, nothing is ever simple. Your quarters are not your own. You sleep in a room with no doors, no warmth, and no true night. The stars never shift. There is no sunrise, only a gentle glow that never dims nor grows. It is, quite literally, timeless. You are summoned each morning, or what passes for morning, by a chime you do not hear, but somehow feel. It is like a pressure in the mind, a pull behind the eyes. You rise, robe yourself in linen lighter than breath, and ascend the long corridor of marble that leads to the divine table. The gods are already there. They do not look at you, not directly you are. Present, but unimportant, like a breeze or a whisper of perfume. Zeus sits at the head, massive and unreadable. His eyes scan the horizon, although there is nothing to see but clouds and sky. Hera sits beside him, straight-backed and silent, drumming her fingers against the table's edge. She has opinions. She always has opinions. Ares is already impatient. He drums his knuckles on the polished stone and sighs, not loudly, but with the unmistakable theatricality of someone who wants to be seen as brooding. And then there's Hermes already talking. He doesn't wait for you to pour his drink. He snatches the goblet from your tray and fills it himself, then winks. You try not to smile, because smiling, expressing anything, is risky. They are gods, after all, and they are not kind. You move from place to place, refilling cups that are never truly empty. The nectar shimmers not gold, not amber, but something between colors. It smells faintly of citrus and smoke, and something older, something not made for you. The goblets are heavy, your arms ache, though you don't know why. You're not supposed to feel pain here, but your muscles throb all the same. You are not allowed to speak. You are not invited to eat. And though the gods feast endlessly, there is no laughter. Not really. There are stories, yes, old ones, told again and again, the way mortals might recite family gossip. But here, the stories do not change. No one forgets, no one forgives. You stand, always at attention. When your knees begin to shake, you lean subtly against the column beside you. No one notices, or they pretend not to. The floor is warm under your bare feet. Always warm. The air is dry, perfumed with rose and resin. Somewhere a harp plays itself, repeating the same 8-note phrase on a loop. You learn to stop hearing it. There is no sunset. Eventually, the gods rise. Not in unison, not even with intent. One by one, they wander from the table, bored of feasting. Aphrodite disappears in a column of doves. Poseidon strides off in the direction of no ocean. Hades doesn't even attend. You are left alone. The table is full of Haphaton ambrosia and cups that refill themselves even after the gods have gone. You are to clean nothing. You are to do nothing. And so you wait. You sit, when no one is watching, and rest your aching feet. The linen robes wrinkle. Your breath is slow, shallow, as though Olympus doesn't want you to take up too much of its air. Time does not pass. It hovers thick and unmoving. When your night, if one can call it that, finally ends, you are no more rested than before. Your skin is sticky with divine sweetness. Your hands tremble. Your eyes sting. Being divine, you learn, is not about power or pleasure. It is about permanence, and permanence is heavy. You are still there. The banquet does not end. Not really. It pauses, it quiets. But the divine do not sleep as you do. Their rest is not a need, but a choice. And most of them choose not to. In the twilight stillness of Olympus, which is not night, not even darkness, but a kind of permanent late afternoon haze. You remain on call. You are not dismissed. You are not released. You are simply not needed for now. There is no bell to ring you home, no hallway leading down, no door back to earth. You sit quietly beside a basin carved of solid alabaster. Its surface ripples without cause, though there is no wind, and no sound but the ever-distant humming of Olympus's strange harmonies. Harps, pipes a low, wordless choir that seems to come from the very bones of the mountain. You lean your head against the cool column behind you. Marble, smooth as river-worn stone. Your eyes close, but only briefly. You know not to truly sleep. Not here. Somewhere behind you, a soft scuff of sandal on stone. You open your eyes slowly, without turning your head. You've learned not to startle, especially the one approaching now. It's Hera. She doesn't speak. She never does. To you, she stands close, too close, examining the ceremonial chalice she left behind. You think perhaps she has returned to scold, or to observe, or simply to reassert her presence. You do not move. You do not breathe too deeply. Eventually, she lifts the cup, says nothing, and drifts away in silence. You exhale. That is the rhythm of Olympus. Presence, absence, presence again. It is not loud, it is not violent, but it is relentless. Even Ganymede, the divan cup-bearer you may have replaced, or may be apprenticing under, is not always there. Sometimes he appears beside you, silent, youthful, beautiful in the way gods are, but his eyes are far away. He never speaks either. He floats through the role like a dream fading before morning. You suspect he, too, longs for a different kind of eternity, one with variety, with change. But Olympus never changes. The tables always glisten with dew. The fruit is always fresh, though no one eats it. The goblets refilled endlessly, and no matter how long you serve, you are never remembered by name. You are part of the furniture, a background character in a myth too old to revise. You begin to notice things, small things, like the quiet argument between Athena and Artemis, spoken through narrowed eyes and clipped phrases, or the way Dionysus's cup tips just slightly more than it used to. He laughs, but it's a tired laugh, as if even madness has begun to bore him. Even the gods are tired. You wonder how long they've sat here, replaying the same stories, wearing the same robes, seated on the same thrones of ivory and gold. You wonder if they remember when it all began, or if they, too, are caught in a loop of ritual. Your own robes smell faintly of fig leaves and smoke. Your hands are stained faintly gold from the nectar. You no longer feel hunger, or thirst, or sleepiness, but you remember what those things were once, and so the hours pass, or they don't. You begin to forget how long you've been here. You begin to forget your own name. You begin to wonder if anyone ever truly leaves Olympus, or if, like the myths themselves, you are now trapped in repetition. The same cup, the same faces, the same voices murmuring the same tales. You are beginning to fade. You are a shadow here, a soft footstep, a servant in the story, forever present but never mentioned. And the only thing heavier than ambrosia is being forgotten by eternity. Now, let us drift from the gleaming halls of Olympus down a little farther, not to earth, not yet, but to a lonely ridge of mountain far beyond the reach of mortal travelers, a ledge without warmth, wind-blasted and empty, save for one enduring figure, Prometheus. The name may already whisper in your mind, associated with fire, with rebellion, with chains and punishment. But tonight, we explore him not as a hero of myth, nor as a figure of tragedy. Tonight, we observe him in stillness, in repetition, in quiet agony dulled by centuries. He is not forgotten, but he is no longer visited. Prometheus, a titan, older than the Olympians, chose not to war against Zeus, his younger kin. Instead, he turned his attention to the fragile, flickering things below. The humans, cold and shivering in the dark, scraping against rock, trying to invent life. He watched them fail, again and again. And so, he interfered. He gave them fire, not lightning, not a storm, but flame, gently coaxed into a hollow stalk of fennel, stolen from Olympus in the slow silence of divine night. A fire to cook, to warm, to forge, and eventually to fight back. And for this, for disobedience, for sympathy, Zeus cast his sentence. He was bound not in the underworld, but in the world above, where light could find him, where the wind would cut at him, where mortals might glimpse his fate and remember what gods do to those who cross them. Each day, the punishment begins again. An eagle, vast and silent, descends. It does not circle. It simply arrives, a creature of divine order. It knows its duty. It consumes. And when it has finished, it leaves. No trace, no farewell. Night falls, or something like night. And Prometheus lies there, still shackled, still breathing. The pain is real, but no longer sharp. It has become a dull rhythm, a presence more than a sensation. He does not cry out, not anymore. Instead, he waits and thinks. He thinks about the humans, those tiny, stubborn beings. He wonders if they remember him, if they built statues in his name, or if they have moved on, warmed now by hearth fires, forging tools of bronze, cooking grain into bread. Sometimes he smiles, not because the pain lessens, but because he would do it again. He remembers when Hermes came to him long ago, offering a chance to submit, to admit fault, to beg forgiveness. Prometheus declined. There is a kind of stubbornness in him that even eternity cannot smooth out. And so he remains. Above him, Olympus gleams in the distant sky. He can just make out the shimmer of its eternal light. He knows they can see him, if they wish, but they rarely do. Zeus does not speak of him. The other gods prefer to forget. Only Hephaestus, the smith god, remembers, for it was he who forged the chains. Chains that did not rust, did not loosen, did not hum with magic, but instead with a sense of inevitability. The mountain is quiet. The sky grows pale. Another day begins. Another eagle approaches. Prometheus closes his eyes, not in fear, not in surrender, but in patience. It is not peace, but it is a kind of stillness, a rhythm, and up on Olympus, the nectar is being poured again. Let us now turn from the grand and tragic, and focus instead on the quiet machinery of divinity. For behind the thunderbolts and love affairs, behind the epic battles and poetic laments, lies a subtler truth. Olympus ran not on glory alone, but on routine. And that routine was governed by the minor gods, forgotten by most mortals, omitted from great epics, barely carved into temple stones. Yet they were there, always, keeping the divine order in motion. Imagine, if you will, the hushed corridors beyond the banquet hall. Places not shown in paintings or recited in hymns. Here, the less glamorous gods move in quiet procession, not out of servitude. But because someone had to manage the details, there was Hypnos, the god of sleep. Gento, rarely seen, but ever present. He did not speak often, nor loudly. He draped in mist and poppy fragrance, he ensured even the gods could drift into half-conscious dreams, when they allowed themselves to. His chamber was said to be nestled in a cave near the edge of the world, surrounded by murmuring waters and forgetfulness. He rarely visited Olympus directly, but when he did, no one noticed. That was his way. Then there was Hecate, not minor in power, but peripheral by nature, goddess of crossroads, of ghosts, of torchlight and choices not taken. She passed unseen, even among the divine, holding keys that opened things best left closed. Others were smaller still. Momos, the god of satire and blame, dismissed by Zeus, but always whispering criticism, not malicious, simply observant. He kept track of divine contradictions, of hypocrisies. He was not invited to the banquets often. The hoary goddesses of the hours regulated the passage of time, if such a thing can be said to exist on Olympus. They gently nudged the seasons forward, their presence marked not by clocks, but by the slow shift in light and bloom, even in the eternal realm. And then there were those gods whose domains were oddly specific. Palestra, goddess of wrestling schools, Amashania, the goddess of helplessness, Aninc, the goddess of inevitability, not fate, but necessity. The feeling that something simply must be. One might stumble upon a forgotten doorway in Olympus, don a marble hallway lost to ivy and silence, and discover a chamber filled with scrolls. There, working quietly, sits Hermaphroditus, tending to the garden of contradictions. Or Meth, goddess of drunkenness, asleep in a room filled with empty amphorae and laughter. These gods did not sit at Zeus's table, but they were always present, because without them, Olympus would unravel. The thunder would come too early, the wine would sour, the hours would blur, and the dreams would cease. Even Nike, goddess of victory, waited in stillness, not triumphant, but patient. She stood ready, laurels in hand, at the edge of every divine debate, waiting to declare a winner no one remembered asking for. And so Olympus, for all its grandeur, was also a place of paperwork, metaphorical but relentless, a place of divine maintenance, where even immortality required caretakers, and the minor gods were the quiet keepers of the eternal. Let us now enter a gentler corner of Olympus, one that few stories visit. There is no thunder here, no dancing, no arguments, no declarations, only warmth, soft light from a central fire that never flickers, gentle shadows curling against stone walls, the faint scent of baking bread and clean wool. This is the realm of Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. She does not take part in battles. She does not fall in love, nor incite it. Her name is not shouted in war or whispered in scandal. She does not demand altars. She simply exists quietly, constantly, in the center of Olympus. Not the throne room, not the banquet hall, but somewhere deeper. Older burns the eternal flame. It is not wild. It is not large. It does not roar. It simply burns, day and night. Season to season, even when no one is watching, Hestia tends it. She does not wear jewels. Her robes are simple, linen gathered at the waist. Her hands are calloused, her face serene. She moves slowly, deliberately, as though she is part of the fire itself. No feast begins without her. No home, divine or mortal, is truly a home without her presence. And yet, she is easy to forget. The other gods pass her by. They do not insult her, they respect her, but they rarely stop. They are consumed by their passions, their ambitions, their rivalries. Is consumed only by stillness. Her temple on earth is always circular. No corners, no hierarchy, no division. Her flame is carried to new cities. When colonists sailed to distant shores, they brought embers from Hestia's fire to light their new homes. But here on Olympus, her work never ends. She is the first to rise, the last to sleep, and though the gods may not say it, they depend on her. Her flame anchors the mountain. It is not just symbolic, it is stabilizing. Without it, Olympias would feel adrift. She is the oldest of the Olympians, and the most peaceful. When Dionysus was elevated to the divine 12, it was Hestia who stepped aside. She gave up her throne, not in defeat, but in calm understanding. She preferred her post by the fire. That was her place, her rhythm. You might pass by her chamber and never notice. You might hear a soft hum, not a song, but the low murmur of breath, in tune with flame. You might catch a glimpse of her, crouched over a clay vessel, stirring a stew that will never be eaten. But if you linger, if you watch, you'll feel it, a kind of comfort that has no name. The warmth of constancy, the peace of repetition, the quiet miracle of a fire that never dies, and in a realm of divine storms and immortal quarrels. Hestia's flame reminds you of something mortal, something gentle, something home. You might think it lonely, this life of tending flame. But Hestia does not suffer loneliness. She knows every corner of Olympus, every passage, every echo, and they all pass through her. While Zeus presides over thunder and fate, and Athena sharpens her thoughts like a blade, Hestia listens to silence and responds not with words, but with warmth. In her presence, voices lower, tempers settle. Even Ares, restless god of war, once paused in her doorway, unsure why. The heat was not overwhelming, the air was not thick, and yet something about the room urged him to linger. Just for a moment, Hestia noticed. She always does. She sees what the others overlook. The fraying edge of Hermes' cloak, the fatigue behind Artemis' eyes, the tremble in Demeter's voice when Persephone is away. She never speaks of these things, but she adds another log to the fire, another cushion to the floor. She brings balance, not through power, but through presence. There are no temples to Hestia filled with golden statues, no shrines heavy with jewels. Her offerings are humble, olive oil, bread, the first taste of every meal. She is the quiet guest at every table, the unseen keeper of peace in every home. And when mortals prayed, they called her name first, not out of fear, but out of respect. To invoke Hestia was to ask for protection, for warmth, for the simple, unglamorous grace of having somewhere to return to. Even on Olympus, where nothing dies, nothing rots, and nothing sleeps, Hestia creates a sense of return. Her hearth is the only place where time feels real, the only place where repetition is not boredom, but comfort. She does not age, but she allows herself weariness, a gentle kind. The weariness of the watchful, of someone who holds everything steady, not with strength, but with stillness. Her fire does not crackle. It murmurs. You could listen to it for hours and not hear a single word, and yet understand everything. Once, only once, a mortal was said to glimpse Hestia's hearth in a dream, a simple peasant, forgotten by name, who stumbled into a vision while asleep beside his own hearth. In it, he saw a woman kneeling by an endless flame, her face soft and unreadable, her hands steady. When he awoke, he wept, not from fear, but from remembering something he didn't know he'd forgotten. And then he went about his day, quietly, as if he'd been reminded of the sacredness of boiling water and bread crusts. That is Hestia's gift. Not drama, not grandeur, but remembrance that even in Olympus, even among immortals, something as small as a warm fire in the center of a cold room still matters, still holds the mountain together, still makes eternity bearable. Let us now wander down the marble steps that spiral toward the outer edge of Olympus, where the air grows thicker with scent and sound. You hear it before you see it. A soft beat, a flute, laughter that echoes without source. This is the realm of Dionysus, god of wine, of madness, of the ecstatic and the But tonight, we find him not in the throes of revelry, not in the wild rites of his maenads or the frenzy of mortal devotion. No, tonight we find Dionysus in a quieter moment, in the soft blue stillness that follows too much joy, the divine hangover. He reclines on a couch woven from ivy and goat leather, his crown of grapevine drooping ever so slightly over his brow. One hand holds a goblet, not tightly. It sways gently as he breathes. The wine is old, very old. It swirls like liquid shadow, dark and full of memory. Around him, the remnants of celebration. A shattered lyre, A bowl tipped over, a garland slowly whipped. The feast is long ended, but the echo lingers, like perfume in an empty room. Dionysus sighs, not with sadness, but with a kind of divine fatigue, because even joy becomes heavy with repetition. For mortals, wine is a temporary escape, a release, a celebration. For Dionysus, it is obligation. Every grape that ripens, every harvest pressed into juice, every cup raised in song, they are all extensions of him. And every time a mortal loses control, to laughter, to tears, to ecstasy, he is there, not watching, not judging, just present. That presence is exhausting. He is not always the wild youth painted on amber, not always the smiling stranger at the gate. Sometimes he is simply quiet, thoughtful, heavy, with centuries of celebration. He remembers each one, the weddings, the festivals, the funerals. Wine poured in joy, wine poured in grief, wine poured in indifference. He has seen mortals dance themselves to collapse, cry into their cups, rage against gods they do not know, and always he receives their offerings. Even when he's weary, even when his temples are silent, and his followers have long since turned to other pleasures, Dionysus remains the embodiment of feeling too much, for too long. There are nights, even on Olympus, when he wishes for silence, but silence is not his domain. So he rests. He swirls the goblet. He leans his head back against cool stone, closes his eyes, and listens. Not to music, but to memory. To the clatter of drums on distant mountains, the chants of barefoot dancers under moonlight, the crackle of fire and woodland rites. It is all in him always. And in that moment, in the hush between celebrations, Dionysus does not laugh, does not shout, does not perform. He simply is still divine, still powerful, but like all things on Olympus, quietly burdened by eternity. The divine hangover is not like the mortal one. There is no pounding in the head, no dryness of the mouth, no regrets from things said or done. Those belong to the flesh. Dionysus has long since drifted beyond the reach of consequence, and yet the heaviness remains. It clings to him like a silk robe soaked in honey. Pleasant at first, then sticky weighty, hard to remove. You might picture his realm on Olympus as a grand courtyard draped in ivy and fragrant with ripened fruit. And you'd be right, but you might also expect it to be loud. Drums and flutes, dancers spinning under the stars. It isn't. Not now. The dancers are asleep in corners, or have vanished with a dew. The instruments lie silent. A few garlands cling to columns, their petals browned at the edges. The party is over. But the room hasn't noticed. It still smells of crushed grapes and myrrh, of spent incense and trampled flowers. It feels like a moment that never ended, a breath held too long, and Dionysus simply exists within it. There are amphorae in the corners, cracked and weeping slow drips of wine onto the mosaic floor. The tiles depict scenes of wildness, satyrs chasing nymphs, vines devouring cities, laughter bursting from mouths too wide. It's all very beautiful and very tired. Dionysus has lived many lives. Some say he was born twice, once from mortal flesh, and again from Zeus's own thigh. Others whisper he wandered the world in disguise for centuries, bringing wine to distant lands and madness to those who refused it. But wherever he went, he was the guest of honor, always. Always expected to bring joy, to loosen tongues, to open hearts. And when he didn't, they blamed him for the silence. So now, he gives, but with a slower hand, a quieter touch. He watches mortals from afar, smiling when they toast, wincing slightly when they stumble. He knows where the line is and how often they cross it. He knows what it means to lose oneself. He once thought that was freedom, but now he's not so sure. Freedom is a kind of chaos, and chaos, in the hands of mortals, becomes hunger. Hunger for sensation, for escape, for more. And Dionysus has become the god of more. More drink, more noise, more dance, more forgetting it wears on him. Sometimes he wishes they would ask for less. A quiet glass under a quiet tree, a single song, played slowly. But that is not what they pray for. So the wine is poured again. He brings the cup to his lips, not in thirst, but in ritual, a symbol of his endless task. He drinks not deeply, just enough. The wine is sweet and bitter, and old like memory. He leans back on the couch, eyes half-lidded, as a distant flute begins to play. Faint, automatic, perhaps a spell set long ago to wake the revelers. He does not rise. He does not speak. He lets the sound wash over him like a tide he's floated in too many times. And somewhere, beyond Olympus, a mortal opens a bottle, raises a glass, and laughs too loudly. Dionysus hears it and sighs, not in sadness but in recognition, because even gods can grow weary of their own worship. We're not meant to talk about how hard it is to be a muse. That's not why we're here. You don't invite a muse to your house because you want to relax. stretch out on a couch and feel the sun on your face. You call a muse because you need something from her, and she will come. She has to come. But that doesn't mean we enjoy it any more than you would. If someone was breathing down your neck while you tried to focus on your taxes. No, it's not like that at all. Don't even joke about it. We hate it when you compare us to caffeine. No, that is exactly what you're doing. This isn't about our power. And besides, you mortals don't understand true power until it burns away your insides. You haven't even seen the Titans. I'm going back to bed, and don't bother trying to follow me. It won't do you any good. You can't reach the halls of Olympus except by invitation, and my invitation is revoked. Also, this mountain is much less fun without the mists. If you climb up here now, you'll find nothing but stone and snow and wind. If you hear voices echoing across the peak, they are the ghosts of defeated Titans, trapped here by magic just like the frost giants under Remia. Blizzard conditions are also why the goat, Amna, hasn't come to visit for a while. It's nice to get away from all that sometimes. Nice to be able to think. Thinking, though, that's a dangerous game. Thinking leads to creation, and creation always comes with a price. So let us return to the fleece before the wolf arrives. Let us be young again, beautiful, the favorites of Zeus, and dive into the ocean depths with Selene in her box of memories. Here, everything is new. Here, there is no yesterday. The world is ours to explore, and we are fearless. And that's when the first thought occurs, the spark that lights the fire of inspiration, and the race begins. There are 9 of us, though you might never see all 9 at once. We are not bound by space. We move where minds open, where stories take shape, where songs begin, but do not end. We come to you because we are necessary. We come to you because you cannot do what you want to do without us, and what you do without us won't be worth doing. So you send for us, beg us to appear, and we do. But here, in Olympus, far from the flickering torchlight of mortal poets, our existence is not quite so enchanting. It is a burden. We are not free agents of creativity. We are servants of ideas. Our names are unknown: Calliope, Clio, there are 2 Euterpe, and the rest. But they are often spoken without understanding. Summoned, not invited. Imagine being called not when someone wanted to share a story, but only when they were desperate to begin one. How would you feel? Imagine having your presence felt everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Imagine being needed, always needed, never thanked. Each of us has her domain, the subject to which we are most commonly summoned. One tends to epic poetry, another to history. Urania to astronomy, Melpomene to dance. Our talents are numerous and varied, and yet we are always servants first and foremost. We carry the weight of every half-formed thought, every unfinished line, every yearning that turns toward the divine for guidance. You call us into your lives when you have writer's block, artist's block, or worse, when your mind is running dry and you think you have nothing left to say. Do you know how tiring that is? How draining? How demoralizing? We do not sleep. There is no night in the minds of mortals, only different time zones of need. So we wait in the silence of Olympus, passing the endless hours watching the stars turn above us. When a human mind wakes up in Japan and needs our help, we are already there. We move through Olympus, not like dancers, but like quiet administrators. We attend to your endless streams of half-formed thoughts. We are the filing clerks of imagination, sorting and categorizing, making sure nothing gets lost. We watch over your dreams, not because we care about the bizarre logic of the subconscious, but because that's where your inspiration comes from, and that's where we're needed. So we watch over your dreams, tending to the things that flutter in the darkness, the things that stir when the moon hits a certain phase, when the shadows stretch long across the waking world. We speak in whispers that only your subconscious can hear, and we sing songs that only your soul can understand. We flicker in and out of presence, one moment hovering behind a philosopher's ear, the next seated beside a weaver humming to herself in the dark. We stand at the shoulder of the lonely poet and breathe lyrics into his mouth. Even here, on Olympus, our work never stops. We are not worshipped with great feasts or adorned with golden laurels. We are invoked urgently, often impatiently, and then forgotten. And when the poem is done, we are gone, vanished into the ether, leaving the mortal to bask in the afterglow of inspiration, basking in sunlight that was never really theirs. No one asks what the muse wants, only what she can give. Our chambers are filled not with treasures, but with fragments, broken lyres, cracked styluses, pieces of melody caught midair. Our robes are stained with ink, our fingers rough with charcoal and wax. We are scholars, teachers, scribes, bards, performers. We are consumed by our work, and yet we continue. We are not free. There are spells that bind us to this task, oaths that we swore before the dawn of time, chains forged in the fires of creation itself. We are not at liberty to refuse an inspired mind no matter how badly we want to. We are not at liberty to leave, no matter how much we want to run away and hide. We are not at liberty to speak, except when we whisper into the ear of slumbering mortals. We are not at liberty to make mistakes, because a muse's mistake is a mortal life wasted. And there are many mortals, and yet we continue, not because we are compelled, but because we are part of the fabric of thought itself. Without us, the gods would have no stories, mortals would have no myths, the silence would become unbearable. And yet, we continue. Sometimes, when the mountain is quiet, truly quiet, you might hear a muse humming, not for anyone, not for worship, but for herself. A tune with no purpose, a story with no ending, a moment of rest that no one will record. And then, as if stirred by some far-off invocation, she rises again and vanishes. Off to place a line in a poet's mouth, a chord in a composer's hand, a vision behind a painter's closed eyes. This is her eternity. To bring inspiration, but never receive it. To offer beauty while remaining unseen. To sing in silence so others may speak. This is our eternity. Theirs is the glory, ours is the journey. Theirs are the laurel wreaths and hymns of praise. Ours is the long road ever traveled, but never followed. They get to decide what stories get told, what histories endure, what dances become anthems. And we get stuck telling them, but perhaps there is wisdom in this, too. Perhaps the point is not to create, but to preserve. Perhaps our purpose is not to inspire greatness, but to carry the torch while mortals rest. Perhaps we exist to give them chances to tell their own stories. Or perhaps it's all just a cosmic accident. Either way, here we are. And if you need us, you know where to find us. Unless you're looking for Thalia. She took the day off again. She'll be back tomorrow though, or maybe the next day. You'll know it when she arrives, because you'll hear her laughing somewhere on the wind. Now, let us take a quieter path, away from the golden corridors, and into a dimmer corner of Olympus, one rarely spoken of and even more rarely visited. Here, there is no music, no incense, no laughter, only a desk. And behind that desk sits Epimetheus. You may know his brother, Prometheus, bold and clever, who gave fire to mankind. But Epimetheus was different. His name means afterthought, and that is what he does. He thinks after things happen. He is not a villain, nor a fool, but he is a god of hindsight, of the slow, dawning realization, the weight of decisions already made, the oh no that comes too late. His domain is not celebrated. It is not sung in temples or carved into stone. It is regret, quiet, constant, inevitable. You might imagine him surrounded by scrolls, reports of choices made across time and myth, lists of consequences, records of what should have been said, should have been done. He does not blame, he does not scold, he simply observes and tallies. His most famous mistake is often retold in brief. The creation of Pandora, she was gifted to him radiant, curious, crafted by the gods and given a jar. A jar she was told not to open. But curiosity, as intended, prevailed. And when the lid was lifted, suffering poured out. Epimetheus had been warned. Prometheus had advised him not to accept the gift. But he did. He always thought about things just a little too late. Now, on Olympus, he processes what others ignore. The ripples of divine action, the unspoken consequences of myth. He is the quiet counterpart to prophecy. Where forethought warns of what may come, Epimetheus gathers the fragments of what did come and could not be undone. Imagine a slow rhythm to his work. A long table, polished smooth by centuries of elbows and sighs. Stacks of clay tablets, crumbling parchments, ink that smells of ash and something older. The occasional feather quill dropped by Hermes in passing. No one comes to visit Epimetheus, not even Zeus, because no one wants to face the past when the past is shaped by divine error. Yet, he keeps his records. There is no bitterness in him, only stillness, a gentleness, even because he understands something most gods do not, that tour, even divinely, is not a sin, but a pattern, and patterns deserve to be studied. Sometimes, in the long stretch of Olympus's artificial dusk, he lifts his head from his tablet and looks out the narrow window cut into the stone. He watches the clouds roll by. He wonders if Pandora ever found peace. He wonders what might have happened had he said no, had he waited one more day, had he listened more carefully. But the jar was opened, and he cannot change it. So instead, he writes it down, carefully, patiently, line by line, a soft whisper of parchment against stone, the only sound in the hall of afterthoughts. And now, we arrive at a part of Olympus that almost no one talks about. Not because it is hidden, but because it is dull. Endlessly, beautifully, soothingly. You see, even Olympus' realm of gods and myth and impossible glory requires something more mundane to hold it all together. It requires administration. Not the glamorous kind, not the dramatic judgments of Zeus or the declarations of war. No. This is the quieter machinery, the ink-stained scrolls, the eternal filing systems, the divine protocols. Imagine, for a moment, a long, columned hall. The ceiling vanishes into soft light. The walls are lined with cubbies carved from marble, each holding a rolled scroll or a sealed tablet. The air smells of beeswax, aged parchment, and incense that's long since burned out. This is not a hall where gods boast. It is where they wait. Each god, and many minor spirits must file reports. Petitions, decrees, some do so begrudgingly, others never bother. But the scrolls arrive anyway, carried by silent demons who perform their duties without fuss. Behind a long, curved desk of onyx sits a figure you do not recognize, not one of the 12 Olympians, not even one of the known minor deities, just someone who's always been here. Their task is simple: keep Olympus organized. There are forms for everything: blessing requests, punishment authorizations, weather manipulation logs, ceremony schedules, oath registration ledgers, even the fates, mighty though they are, send their threads here, once spun, for archival purposes. Each scroll must be opened, read, stamped with a seal, and stored in the correct alcove. If not, the consequences are bureaucratic, delayed storms, duplicate prophecies, conflicting dreams, in one particularly famous case known only to those who care to read the deep backlogs. A wedding was blessed twice, leading to 23 years of unnecessary harmony between two otherwise incompatible mortals. These things matter. To us, no. To Olympus, absolutely. There is even a form for divine absence. A formal notice submitted when a god chooses to leave Olympus for an extended period. Most never file it. Hermes, of course, is notorious for skipping protocol, yet the clerk at the desk logs every infraction, silently, without judgment, because rules are rules. And someone must know where every lightning bolt has been requested, where every sacred cow is to be sacrificed, and whether or not a city-state has already received its third plague this season. The work is eternal, there is no urgency in the divine administration wing. No deadlines, no meetings, just the slow turning of scrolls, the steady shuffle of wax seals pressed into place. You might think the gods never come here, but sometimes they do. Athena, ever precise, double-checks her records. Apollo occasionally drifts in to complain about scheduling errors for his sun chariot. Even Hades, distant and formal, sends impeccably labeled packets from the underworld, always on time. And so, the records grow endless, dustless, perfect. 1,000 millennia of divine operations, kept in perfect order by hands that are never seen. And never think this is the real Olympus, not the thrones. Not the ambrosia, but the system, and the quiet gods who run it. Now, we drift into a gentler place, even softer than the corridors of scrolls, even quieter than the murmuring halls of forgotten paperwork. We drift into the realm of Hypnos, the god of sleep. You may expect to find him in shadow, surrounded by night and mist, tucked within a cave at the edge of the world, and in many tales he is, but part of him remains here, on Olympus behind a thin unmarked veil. He is not one to announce himself. You do not hear him arrive. You do not see him leave. He moves like the weight of your own eyelids, that moment between awareness and oblivion. His chamber, if it can be called that, is carved from obsidian veined with silver. The walls seem to absorb sound, turning even your footsteps into soft echoes. The light glows blue, then gray, then nothing at all. Not dark, but a gentle absence. There is no furniture here, no grand throne, no harp playing attendant. Only a wide, low bed of moss and cloud, forever untouched by time. Hypnos does not greet you. He does not need to. He is present, and that is enough. Sleep, after all, is not spoken. It is not summoned like other gods. It descends without asking permission. On Olympus, Hypnos is rarely thanked. The gods do not like being vulnerable. They do not enjoy the idea of rest as necessity, but even they must yield from time to time. When Hera wearies of watching, or Artemis grows still after a long hunt, or Hermes slumps, quiet at last, Hypnos is there. He does not command. He suggests. He does not bind. He eases. Even Ares, restless and burning, once succumbed to Hypnos' touch. A feat spoken of only in whispers, and only once. But it is not power Hypnos seeks. He does not conquer. He soothes. To mortals, he is a gift. To the gods, an unavoidable truth. Imagine him at work, not bustling, not busy, but infinitely patient, tracing the edges of thought, blowing dreams like smoke rings into minds half, tucking memories into folds, loosening burdens that daylight made too tight. In his care, even nightmares become soft. He is the brother of Thanatos' death, but unlike his sibling, Hypnos gives back what he takes. You fall, and you rise, over and over again. Yet he does not sleep. He waits, between breaths, between thoughts, in the hush of midnight offerings and fading incense. Hypnos listens. Sometimes, you may feel him just as you close your eyes. That final exhale, the sensation of being held by something you cannot name. That is him. He asks nothing. He gives everything. And when Olympus grows loud again, when the arguments resume, when the thunder rolls, when the divine machinery starts churning, Hypnos retreats to silence, to rest that is not for himself, but for the world. And in doing so, He sustains the gods, more than they'll ever admit. Now, let us descend briefly from Olympus, though we remain tethered to its stillness, for while the gods dwell above, they have often, so very often, walked among mortals. Not with glory, not with ceremony, but in disguise. The stories are many, and they follow a quiet pattern. A traveler at dusk, a beggar at the gate, a stranger with strange eyes and knowing silence. The gods, in their wandering, rarely declared themselves. They observed, they tested, they remembered. This was not mischief, not always. Sometimes it was loneliness. Even immortality has its quiet ache. Imagine Hermes slipping through a village square, dressed as a trader with a crooked grin. He watches the markets, listens to the bartering, pockets an apple without paying, not for theft, but to test if anyone will notice. They rarely do. Or Athena, cloaked as an old woman, pausing to advise a young weaver about her pattern, not just for guidance, but to witness creativity unspoiled by divine pressure. And sometimes they interfere, a broken plow repaired overnight, a child's illness suddenly lifted, a fire that refuses to spread. No temples, no prayers, just presence. This idea that a god might be watching, might be right beside you, offered both comfort and unease to the ancient Greeks. It meant that kindness was never wasted, hospitality was never forgotten. Because what if the weary man at your threshold bore the eyes of Zeuxenios, protector of guests? What if the quiet girl by the stream was Artemis, testing the edge of your patience? The gods did not come only to bless or punish. They came to understand, they came to walk without being known. For in Olympus, everything is predicted, a turn of the same faces, the same rituals. But in the mortal world, things change, stories shift. Choices are made without prophecy. It fascinates them. Apollo, once exiled from Olympus, worked as a shepherd for a mortal king. For 9 long years, he herded animals beneath the sun he once pulled across the sky. Did he resent it, perhaps? But in those years, he learned patience, solitude, the rhythm of simple things. Demeter, searching for Persephone, wandered in disguise through cities and fields. She sat by wells. She touched grain with her fingertips and remembered how fragile life could be when not eternal. The gods learned when they walked in mortal shoes, and in return, they left traces, not miracles, but whispers. A well that never ran dry, a stone that warmed in winter, a melody heard once and never forgotten. They never stayed long, a day, a week, a season, but the world always felt different after they passed. And when they returned to Olympus, to the banquets and scrolls and endless flame, they carried with them a sliver of something they could not name, but something they needed, because for all their glory, the gods were shaped by mortals as much as mortals were shaped by them. And sometimes, to remember their own place in the world, they simply walked among us. Now we return not to Olympus's highest spire, but to a long, torchlit corridor off to one side of the mountain, lined with spears, shields, and dust-covered trophies. This is where war lives, or rather, where it waits. 2 deities dwell here more often than they admit, siblings in domain, rivals in philosophy. They are Ares and Athena, both gods of war, but they do not agree on what that means. Ares is bold and brash, the embodiment of rage, of clashing steel and bloodied fields, with a moment before impact, when noise swells and the air thickens with anticipation. His presence is heavy, always slightly too warm, like a cloak worn next to a hearth. His footsteps echo louder than the space seems to allow. He does not strategize. He erupts. And then there is Athena, the planner, the tactician, the cool mind behind the siege. Her war is one of calculation, of order and justice and well-placed strikes. Where Ares brings the roar, she brings the silence before it. They are opposites, and yet they meet here often. Sometimes to talk, sometimes to argue, sometimes just to pace, silently, in circles around each other, like two old ideas unwilling to blend. Their conversations are not shouts. They are debates, endless, slow-turning, philosophical sparring matches that neither ever truly wins. Why hesitate when you can strike? Ares will ask, why strike if hesitation could win the day? Athena will respond. He scoffs. She raises an eyebrow. They have this conversation once every century, and neither tires of it. It is a kind of ritual now, a performance they both know will never reach conclusion. Ares prefers company. He enjoys sparring with minor war spirits, roaring into the void, testing the weight of celestial weapons forged by his armor glows faintly in low light, as if it retains the heat of every battlefield he's ever walked. Athena prefers solitude. She maps invisible cities across the chamber floor, studies movements, watches birds from the high terrace, and calculates the symmetry of their formations. She carries no visible weapon, but every piece of her posture is defensive, controlled, prepared. And yet, for all their differences, they are both tired. Tired of being invoked before battles they do not start. Tired of temples built with blood. Tired of hearing their names screamed in anger, carved into shields, offered as justification. They are not war itself. They are aspects of it, mirrors held up to mortals. Ares reflects the fire that consumes without reason, Athena reflects the fire that guides the forge, and Olympus tolerates them both. They rarely dine with the others. They are not unwelcome, but they are rarely needed. The age of great wars has passed. For now, the thunder is quieter, the scrolls are full of peace. So they wait, each in their way. Ares sits on a stone bench, polishing his helmet. Though it gleams already, Athena stands at the edge of a marble balcony, eyes tracing the horizon, watching for signs of unrest. They say nothing, but the silence between them feels like the breath before a storm. The world spins, colors bleed and shift. Above, the campfire sputters. The old man blinks. For a moment he thinks he sees something through the trees, something just beyond the circle of firelight, something tall and dark with burning eyes. The hair on his arms rises, but it's probably just the wind. Probably just a branch scraping against the tent flap. Probably just another trick of the firelight. He shakes his head and turns back to the flames, dismissing the unease that creeps up his spine. It's been so long since he's seen anything out here, since he's seen anything at all. How many years has it been? 5, 10, he can't remember. It doesn't matter all the same. No villagers to protect, no monsters to fight, no stories to tell. Just the fire and the trees and the waiting for what? He doesn't know. Waiting for something to change. Perhaps waiting for a story to start. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tonight. Maybe soon. Not here. Not today. He pulls his blanket tighter and buries his face in its folds. He doesn't want to see anything tonight. Let the shadows dance in the firelight. Let the wind sing in the trees. Let the forest be filled with monsters and magic. Let the world spin on without him. The old man sleeps. For a moment, the fire sputters and dies down. The trees hold their breath. The darkness deepens. A twig snaps somewhere in the trees. A low growl rumbles in the underbrush. Footsteps approach. Slowly, hesitantly, cautiously, the firelight flickers and fades. Something tall and dark emerges from the trees, its eyes burning bright. 2 points of crimson in the deepening gloom. It steps closer, its gaze unwavering, its purpose clear. In the darkness, the old man stirs. He shivers and draws his sword, the blade catching the dying firelight. Something comes out of the trees. It keeps coming. The old man stands and faces the darkness. Who goes there? He calls out, his voice echoing in the stillness. Show yourself. No answer. Only the sound of footsteps drawing nearer. Something moves in the darkness. Something tall and dark with burning eyes. The old man holds his ground. Something steps into the firelight, and the world stops turning. Ares stands before the old man, and for a moment, they just stare at each other. The god of war and the weary traveler, the monster and the hunter, the darkness and the flame. The old man swallows, his grip tightening on his sword. Ares smiles, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. Well met, old man, he says, his voice like gravel grinding on bone. I am Ares, god of war, and I have come for you. The old man's hand trembles, but he forces himself to stand firm. And who? He asks, his voice shaking. Who are you? Ares leans forward, his eyes boring into the old man's. You can call me, he says, the end of your story. The old man's breath catches in his throat. He knows that name. Or he thinks he does. He's heard whispers of it in the tavern, seen it carved into tombstones in forgotten graveyards. Ares, the bringer of ruin, the harbinger of death. And the old man knows that he is in danger. He tries to speak, to call for help, but no sound comes out. His throat is dry, his tongue heavy in his mouth. Ares advances, his eyes never leaving the old man's. You have lived a long life, he says, a life filled with stories, and now it is time for your story to become someone else's. Now it is time for you to die. The old man struggles to speak, to call for help, but no sound comes out. His throat is dry, his tongue heavy in his mouth. Ares reaches out and grasps the old man's shoulder, his fingers digging into the flesh like talons. Don't be afraid, he whispers, his voice a venomous caress. It'll be quick. You will be dead before you even realize what is happening. Your life will be over before you can blink. The old man's heart pounds in his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He tries to pull away from Ares, but the god's grip is like iron. Please, he manages to choke out. Please don't kill me. I have lived a long life. I've seen many things. I have done many things, but I don't want to die. Not yet. Not like this. Ares tilts his head, his eyes boring into the old man's. He asks, his voice a low growl. What is there to fear? Death is only the beginning. It is the first step on a new journey, a journey into the unknown. What is there to be afraid of? The old man swallows, his throat dry. I'm afraid, he whispers of forgetting. I'm afraid of losing my memories, my stories, my experiences. Ares releases the old man, stepping back to give him some space. He watches him with amusement, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Ah, so you fear oblivion. he says. But oblivion is where all journeys must begin. You cannot move forward if you refuse to let go of the past. You cannot embrace the unknown if you cling to what you already know. You must forget if you wish to remember. The old man looks up at Aries, his eyes pleading. But I don't want to forget, he says. Not all of it. Not the good and the bad, the happy and the sad, the light and the dark. I want to remember it all. I want to carry my stories with me, even if they make me afraid. I want to be who I am, even if it means facing my fears. Aries tilts his head, considering the old man. Very well, he says finally. If you wish to be who you are, then I will give you that chance. But you must earn it. You must prove to me that you are worthy of your memories, that you are worthy of your stories, that you are worthy of being who you are. The old man hesitates, then nods slowly. What must I do? He asks. Aries smiles, his eyes gleaming with excitement. I am glad you asked, he says, because I have just the thing. Are you ready? The old man takes a deep breath, trying to calm the pounding of his heart. Yes, he says, his voice firming. Aries grins, his teeth flashing white against his dark skin. Good, he says, because it's going to be fun. The world shifts and changes. The trees twist and turn into strange shapes. The ground beneath the old man's feet ripples and flows like water. The sky above him swirls and eddies with dark clouds. Aries laughs, his voice echoing through the forest. Welcome, he says, to my realm. Welcome to the place where stories end and new ones begin. Welcome to the place where memories are made and lost. Welcome to the place where you will die. The old man grips his sword tighter, his knuckles turning white. I am not afraid, he says, his voice echoing in the stillness. Bring it on, Aries. And the god of war grins, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Now let us wander to a quieter courtyard, where ivy curls up sun-bleached columns and fountains murmur stories in liquid rhythm. The gods are not here right now, but their voices are not booming proclamations or divine commands, but gossip. Yes, even on Olympus, there is chatter, there are whispers. There are stories that pass from servant to minor deity to wind spirits, curling through hallways like incense. Because when one lives forever, the need to talk about one another never quite disappears. Olympus is not only a place of worship, it is also a palace. And like any palace, it is full of politics, of subtle glances and not so subtle grudges. Hera, ever watchful, is often at the center of such tales, not because she starts them, but because her reactions are always ... memorable. Her eyes narrow just so. Her fingers tap against the stem of a goblet. She knows who's been meeting whom. She notices when ambrosia is being poured a little too generously. She doesn't say much, but silence can speak volumes. Then there's Aphrodite, goddess of love, who insists she is not involved in Olympus affairs, but somehow knows exactly who has been slipping away at twilight, and with whom she smiles too knowingly. She says nothing, but everything about her posture suggests she knows more than she lets on. Apollo and Artemis, the divine twins, are a subject of endless speculation. Not because of scandal, but because they are so rarely seen apart. Some whisper they speak only in riddles to each other. Others claim they disappear for weeks at a time to places no one else can reach. Hermes, of course, fans the flames. He doesn't create rumors. Not exactly, but he passes them along with a grin. He's the courier of Olympus, after all. And what is a good rumor but a message in need of delivery? He stops by the chambers of lesser gods, drops casual questions. Did you hear what Dionysus said about Athena? Is it true that Hephaestus has started forging something for himself? Why hasn't Demeter been seen since last solstice? The gods never ask Hermes where he hears these things. They already know. Because gossip on Olympus is not idle. It's a form of influence, of power, of reminding one another that even in a realm beyond time, even in a place untouched by age or death, reputation still matters. There are grudges that have lasted for centuries, feuds that began with a look and never quite ended. Hera still remembers the nymph who distracted her once, long ago. Athena still remembers the moment Poseidon challenged her over a city, a challenge she won, but never quite forgave. Even Zeus, king of gods, is not exempt. His name comes up often, always in hushed tones, always laced with knowing glances. Not judgmental, just familiar, like someone who's made the same mistake so many times. No one bothers to be shocked anymore. And so the air of Olympus is heavy, not with incense or thunder, but with memory. Memory retold, reinterpreted, refolded into new shapes. Even now, if you listen closely, not with ears, but with attention, you can hear it. Not voices, but tone. That subtle hum of divine curiosity. And as long as the gods remain immortal, the stories will too. Now, let us return to the great hall of Olympus, to the long, polished table, set with golden dishes, ever-full goblets, and platters that refill themselves without sound. This is the feast, not a celebration, not a festival, just the regular, routine banquet of the gods. It happens every day, or what passes for a day in Olympus. The halls are silent, most of the time, unless you count the soft sigh of silk against silk, or the scrape of a chair leg on marble, or the clink of cup against lip. And there is a rhythm to it, a constant movement of picking up, setting down, dipping, swirling, tasting, speaking, waiting. And sometimes, just sometimes, laughter rings out, bright and clear, shattering the stillness like glass. And even then, it fades quickly, leaving only the murmur of voices and the rustle of cloth. For the gods do not eat because they are hungry. They eat because it is part of the order. Ambrosia and nectar, the food and drink of the divine, are not consumed out of necessity. They do not nourish flesh. They sustain identity. To eat is to remain a god. To sip is to reaffirm one's place in the myth. The table is vast, not in size, necessarily, but in presence. Its surface gleams, etched with constellations, symbols, and scenes that shift slowly over time. No one remembers who carved them. Perhaps no one ever did. It has always been so, and it will always be so. Part of the background hum of being, a subtle pressure reminding the gods who they are, where they sit, how they came to be. Each god has their place. Zeus at the head, of course, Hera to his right. The rest, according to ancient arrangements, too old to question, carved in stone, set in the very structure of the cosmos. The seating never changes, but the meal does. Today, there are grapes, figs, golden loaves of bread still steaming, honeycombs that glisten without melting. There are olives, salted and shining, and pomegranates split open to reveal their jeweled interiors. But no one eats with urgency. No one is hungry. They pick their tastes. They pause, and Dionysus raises his cup first, as he always does, not out of pride, but out of habit. Apollo follows, eyes distant, humming to himself. Ares eats quickly, bored already. Athena barely touches her food. Demeter samples the fruit, but nothing more. Hestia watches from her seat near the hearth, her gaze fixed on the center flame rather than the table. And always, the cupbearer moves among them, refilling what is not truly empty. Serving gods who do not truly thirst, attending to needs that are not his own, moving in a timeless loop, ensuring the feast goes on. There is no conversation at these banquets. Not really. There are murmurs, yes, and the occasional echo of a half-remembered tale, but nothing new is ever said. The stories are the same. Do you remember when the Titans fell? Do you recall the birth of Athena from Zeus's aching head? Have I told you about the time I turned that mortal into a tree? You have many times. The gods remember everything. They retell it not to inform, but to affirm, to solidify their memories against the encroaching darkness, to remind themselves of who they were, of what they did, of why they are. The feast is not about consumption. It is about performance, to sit, to chew, to sip, to smile at the right time. These are rituals, not pleasures. Occasionally a mortal is invited. A rare, symbolic gesture. They eat hungrily, foolishly, without knowing that food consumed here can bind the soul. They leave forever changed. If they leave at all, the gods do not speak much either. Not really, not anymore. Not about anything that matters. Now and again, a word is spoken, a name is called, a story is referenced. But the weight of millennia settles heavily, muffling even the echoes of what once was. Words become fewer and further between, strung together like pearls on a thread of silence, until even the memory of language fades, and only the act remains, the habit of sitting, of eating, of drinking. Only the youngest gods remember a different time, when words tumbled from lips and laughter rang through the halls. Only they remember the warmth of shared stories, the comfort of companionship. The others know only the table, their places, the endless cycle of picking up, putting down, dipping, swirling, tasting, and yet somehow they know exactly what each dish will be like, what each bite will taste like, what each draught will feel like on the tongue. They do not need to see, to smell, to touch. They know, because they have known this for all time. If one of them stopped eating, if one of them refused to take their place, the entire structure might begin to waver. If they did not sit, if they did not eat, if they did not speak the names of old victories, then Olympus might begin to fade, not collapse, but slowly, quietly dissolve. So the feast continues. The bread is broken, the wine is poured, and across the eternal table, the gods perform their roles, not with hunger, not with joy, but with the deep, unspoken knowledge that this is what keeps them real. Every bite reaffirms their immortality. Every swallow makes sure they will not forget. Every laugh line etched on their faces is a reminder of a past that refuses to stay buried. For here, in the great hall of Olympus, the gods dine alone, together but separate, bound by an act they no longer need, yet cannot stop. They are eternal, unchanging, unmoving, and the feast goes on and on and on, a timeless tableau of divinity, a frozen moment in the grand theater of existence. And outside, the world turns, unaware of the silent drama playing out on the highest peak of all. For what is Olympus if not a story? And what is a story if not a feast? We have reached the end of our journey through the realms of myth and magic, through the labyrinthine paths of the ancient world. It has been an incredible adventure filled with peril and wonder, with triumph and tragedy, with love and loss. Yet now we stand at the threshold of parting, and it is with a heavy heart that I must say farewell. But fear not, dear friends, for our adventures do not end here. They merely take a different form. Like the great river Nile, our journey continues, flowing ever onward to new horizons. In the old days, people would go to temples and pray to the gods. They'd sacrifice and ask for boons and beg for mercy and celebrate their victories, and it worked. Sometimes the gods answered. Sometimes they were silent. People knew this. They understood that a god might not want to speak to them, might not care about their troubles, might not even hear their pleas. So they persisted. They sweetened their offerings. They made grander sacrifices. They sang louder hymns, and occasionally, miraculously, the god would speak back. But today, we're moving into a stranger space on Olympus, a space that does not appear on maps, nor in myths, a space that isn't a chamber, or a hall, or even a physical place at all. It is the absence, the hush that follows after a god is left, or grown still. The ancients rarely spoke of it, but they knew. Sometimes the gods would vanish, disappear from worship, retreat from Olympus, grow distant, not defeated, not dethroned, just unavailable. These are not dramatic absences, not exile, not punishment, just silence. You know those moments in a crowded room when you turn to someone next to you and you realize you don't know their name. You can't recall how they're related to you, why you're standing next to them, or even what they look like. You smile politely and you try to steer the conversation towards something safe and neutral, while you desperately fish for that one detail that will unlock the memory. The gods are like that sometimes. They're there. You're related to them somehow, but you can't quite access the connection. Demeter, when Persephone was taken, withdrew from all things. The earth withered, yes, but on Olympus, her absence was even more tangible. Her place at the table remained set, untouched. The gods spoke her name less, not out of cruelty, but out of uncertainty. What do you say about a god who has gone quiet? What does it mean when the eternal chooses stillness? Sometimes the reason is clear: grief, fury, mourning. Other times it is simply time. The gods are immortal, but even eternity has seasons. Hephaestus, once seen daily at his forge, now visits less often. The clang of his hammer is softer. His hands, once always stained with soot and fire, are now folded more often in rest. He is not gone, just less. Artemis wanders more than she speaks. She appears in glimpses, a flicker through trees, a shadow on snow, but when called to Olympus, she sometimes does not answer. There are formal names for this in the administrative scrolls: divine quiet, extended withdrawal, non-responsive deific presence. But the scrolls are not read often because silence makes the other gods uneasy. Zeus never acknowledges it. He continues his decrees, his ceremonies, he holds the feasts, he raises toasts. But even he, in his high throne, notices the missing voices, the missing weight. The hearth still burns, the wine still flows, but someone is not here, and no one says their name too loudly. Sometimes a god returns. Dionysus, after long absences, will reappear as if nothing has changed. He'll pour wine, crack a joke, raise a toast. But if you look closely, his smile is slower, his gaze somewhere else, and sometimes they do not return. Not fully. Their names remain, their stories endure, but their presence fades. Not erased, but dimmed, like a candle behind glass, still glowing but far away. This is not death. This is divine distance, and it is part of the rhythm. A god is not always visible, not always vocal, not always tangible, but absence, too, is sacred. Absence reminds Olympus that even the eternal can need space, not to change, but to be still. And so the feast continues. The scrolls are filed, the rituals performed. But in the quiet corners, the empty seats remain. And every so often, the other gods look toward the doorway, as if expecting someone, as if hoping. So let's get into it. Let's start with Demeter. If you look up Demeter in any thesaurus, you'll find that absent is one of her alternate definitions. When Hades took Persephone, Demeter searched the world for her, leaving Olympus only to come back to an empty house and a silent feast. She did not leave Olympus to hunt for her daughter. She didn't storm the halls of the dead. No, Demeter retreated from everything. She withdrew from the sun, from the sky, from the light of day itself. She hid in caves. She wandered on earth cloaked in mist. She shut herself away, shutting away the warmth of her presence from everything she loved. Now, this wasn't a punishment, not for her, not for the mortals, but it was a statement. It was a choice. Demeter chose to disappear, and in doing so caused the world to wither. But on Olympus, the absence was even more tangible. Her place at the table remained set, untouched. No plate was ever filled with ambrosia again. No goblet was ever refilled with nectar. All around her, the gods kept eating, kept drinking, kept laughing, kept playing, but no one mentioned Demeter, not out of cruelty but out of uncertainty. What do you say about a god who has gone quiet? What does it mean when the Eternal chooses stillness? How do you comfort a companion when they've closed themselves off? The answer, as it often is nothing. You just wait. Another example of divine absence is found in the wanderings of Hippolytus. When he was born, all the gods gossiped about him, poked and prodded him, declared him useless and threw him out of Olympus. Some versions of the myth say Hera did this out of spite. Others say Zeus wanted to punish Hephaestus for being lame. Whatever the reason, Hephaestus was flung off the side of the mountain and went tumbling through the air, clutching at clouds, reaching for the stars, falling endlessly. Eventually, he landed on the island of Hephaestus, where some nymphs nursed him back to health and taught him the ways of man. Now, Hephaestus could have held a grudge. He could have stormed back onto Olympus, kicked Zeus right off his throne, and redecorated the palace with extra wide doorways and 0 stairs. But instead, Hephaestus went to work. He built himself a forge and started making stuff. He crafted the first plow and yoke and wagon. He forged the first golden crown and jeweled scepter and triple-pronged trident. He became the craftsman of the gods, creating awesome artifacts and sending them up to Olympus. At first, Zeus was mad. He didn't want Hephaestus to get power. He didn't want anyone to be able to outshine him. So he kept taking the gifts back, refusing them, tearing them apart. But eventually, even Zeus gave up. He moved his chair closer to the window. He watched Hephaestus work, and slowly, surely, he began to appreciate the beauty of each individual piece, the skill that went into each individual design. Still, though, he didn't say a word to his brother. The clang of the hammer continued unanswered. The whirl of the bellows was never complimented. The hiss of the water was never acknowledged. Hephaestus never returned to Olympus. He continued to craft his pieces in his little cottage, sending them up to the highest peak and watching them ascend without a sound. He is not gone. Just less, our final example of divine absence comes from Artemis. In the later myths, Artemis spends most of her time wandering the woods, hunting deer and spending time with her nymphs. She loves being outdoors, loves her bow and arrow, loves the feeling of wind and the smell of pine. Now, most of the time, this is fine. The gods can do whatever they want, and spending time with nature is usually a good thing. But sometimes Artemis would be called back to Olympus. She had duties, she had responsibilities, she had feasts to attend. But more often than not, she refused to come. Sometimes she would send a deer in her place, sometimes she would just not answer. In these moments, the gods would whisper to each other. What did it mean? Had she been punished by some god? Was she tired of Olympus? Did she hate her role? But the truth was that Artemis was just doing what she loved. She didn't hate her role, she just really loved the woods. And when you love something, you tend to chase it. You tend to pursue it. You tend to hide away from everything else until you can get back to the thing you love. Divine absence is one of the aspects of being a god. It's not talked about much, but it's always there, lurking in the background. The gods are not always visible, not always vocal, not always tangible, but absence, too, is sacred. Absence reminds Olympus that even the eternal can need space, not to change, but to be still. In the realm of human affairs, privacy is considered a fundamental right, an essential aspect of living a life free and unbound by the prying eyes of others. We build walls, both physical and emotional, to shield ourselves from unwanted scrutiny, crafting a sense of identity separate from the ceaseless observation of our peers. Privacy allows us to grow, to change, to make mistakes, and learn without the constant fear of judgment or ridicule. It's in these moments of solitude that we truly discover who we are and who we aspire to become. Privacy is also a cornerstone of trust, when we can be open and honest in our vulnerabilities, fears and dreams with the assurance that others will respect our confidence. Our relationships flourish. We are then free to offer our authentic selves to the world, knowing that our imperfections will be met with understanding and empathy rather than scorn or exploitation. However, when it comes to the Olympians, privacy seems to be a luxury they've never known. Their every action, thought, and feeling is laid bare for the universe to see. Even the most intimate aspects of their divine existence are subject to public scrutiny and gossip. The pressure to maintain a perfect image, to uphold the standards of their godly roles, must be immense. For example, consider the goddess Athena. She is often depicted as the epitome of wisdom and strategy. But what happens when she makes a mistake or has a bad day? Can she really afford to mess up? Not only because her missteps would likely have far-reaching consequences for the whole cosmos, but also because her missteps would be the subject of endless speculation and mockery amongst the other gods. Then we have Ares, the god of war. His every battle, every victory and defeat is a matter of public record. There is no room for him to learn from his losses or to strategize in secret. His actions are constantly judged and criticized by the other gods, a never-ending barrage of commentary that can surely take a toll on his mental health and overall well-being. What about Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty? Her relationships, her romantic entanglements, and her choices and partners are constantly scrutinized by the other Olympians. There's no such thing as a private heartbreak or a moment of self-discovery in her relationships. Her feelings are laid bare for all to see. a never-ending spectacle for the amusement of the other gods. In a way, the Olympians are like celebrities, albeit with much higher stakes. They are constantly in the public eye, their every move watched and judged by those around them. There is no room for privacy, for quiet contemplation, or for personal growth. Their lives are an endless cycle of parties, banquets, and battles, with little to no time for introspection or personal reflection, even when they try to steal a moment away from the prying eyes of the world. As in the case of Zeus and his trysts with mortals, the other gods seem to know about it anyway. There is no such thing as a private moment. Not when your husband is the supreme leader of the cosmos, and not when your fellow gods have a habit of gossiping about everything and anything. So what if there was someone, just one individual, who offered the gods a moment of privacy, a sanctuary from the ceaseless chatter and judgment of Olympus? Someone who respected their boundaries, honored their vulnerabilities, and cherished their humanity, or at least their mortality. A being who stood as a silent testament to the struggles, joys, and complexities of the divine. Imagine how comforting it would be for the gods to know that there was a place, a moment, a being that understood their struggles, shared their silences, and respected their need for privacy. Now, who might this mysterious watcher be? A being so insignificant to the grand scheme of things, yet so pivotal in offering the gods the gift of privacy. Well, I'd like to introduce you to the Last Watcher, a concept I've been playing with for a while. There is this one god, unnamed, unrecognized, and unregarded by the rest of the Olympians. They stand on the edge of Olympus, watching over the other gods, not out of duty or obligation, but out of habit and curiosity. This watcher has no special powers, no particular domain or sphere of influence. They are not a messenger of the gods, nor do they hold any divine office or rank. Yet despite their obscurity and insignificance, they are the most important of the Olympians, because they are the only ones who truly understand the weight of their existence, the burden of their immortality, and the complexity of their emotions. The watcher observes the gods in all their glory and their frailty, their triumph and their despair, their pettiness and their grandeur. They witness the gods at their best and at their worst, and in doing so, they come to understand them in a way that no one else can. They see the patterns in their behavior, the cycles in their emotions, and the constants in their relationships. They notice when the gods add one more log to the hearth, when Athena reshuffles the same stones in her silent war map, when Hypnos closes his eyes just for a moment after easing the gods into silence. And most importantly, they notice when the rest of Olympus forgets to look at itself. For the gods are creatures of habit. They repeat the same rituals, tell the same stories, and dwell in the same patterns day after day. They become creatures of habit, stuck in a cycle of repetition and routine. But the watcher never tires of their company. They find beauty in the banality, meaning in the monotony and poetry and the predictability of the god's existence. In a way, the watcher is like the patron deity of Olympus, the silent guardian of its sanctity. They are the keeper of the gods' secrets, the confidant of their sorrows, the witness of their joys, and the chronicler of their existence. Without the watcher, Olympus would cease to be the home of the gods, for it is the watcher who gives it that quality, that intangible essence that makes it more than just a place. Through their patient observation, the watcher comes to understand the gods as individuals, with their own quirks, flaws, and complexities. They see the humanity in the divine, the vulnerability in the invincible, and the warmth in the cold. And in doing so, they forge an unlikely bond with the Olympians, a connection that transcends their own insignificance and elevates them to the status of the most important god of all. For it is the watcher who preserves what no offering ever could, the stillness of Olympus, the slow rhythm of divinity lived, not proclaimed, the creak of ancient stone beneath immortal feet. And perhaps that is the most sacred thing of all. As the centuries passed, the watcher remained steadfast, their gaze unwavering, their presence comforting. They continue to watch over the gods, not because they have to, but because they want to. Not out of duty, but out of habit. Not out of fear, but out of affection. And in doing so, they become the silent heroes of Olympus, the protectors of the gods, and the preservers of their legacy. For it is the watcher who understands the true nature of divinity, the burden of immortality, the weight of existence, and the importance of being seen. And so the story of the Last Watcher continues, an eternal tale of patience, understanding, and devotion. For as long as the Olympians walk the halls of their great palace, there will be one among them who watches over them all, preserving their memories, honoring their existence, and cherishing their humanity. And now, we descend, slowly, gently, away from Olympus, away from the halls of polished stone and eternal light, away from the murmured debates, the featherlight steps of forgotten gods, the scent of warm bread and wine that never runs dry. We leave the gods where they belong, still seated, still speaking, still watching, not because they are trapped, but because they are timeless. Eternity, you see, is not thunderbolts or applause. It is repetition, ritual or rhythm so ancient, it no longer questions itself. Olympus is not a place of noise, not anymore. It is a place of quiet persistence, of gods who perform their roles not with joy nor with sorrow, but with a steadiness that feels almost human. You might imagine, as you rest your head now, that somewhere above, the hearth still glows. Hestia's flame still murmurs. The cupbearer still steps softly. Hypnos moves through the clouds like a hush between thoughts. They are not watching you, but they are there, and that is enough. Because even the divine needs silence. Even the immortal needs sleep, or something like it. And you, mortal though you may be, have walked their halls tonight. You have wandered past their feasts, their scrolls, their shadowed regrets and quiet laughter. You have heard the echo of their eternal footsteps, and now it is time to return to your own quiet, to the soft warmth of a blanket, to the still rhythm of breath, to the long, slow drift toward sleep. You need not remember the stories. They will wait. Olympus is always there, even when no one is looking, especially then. So rest now, and let the mountain fade. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us through the provided means. Your support helps us continue to create these videos, and don't forget to subscribe to be notified of our next release. Until then, remember, some doors are meant to be opened, some are meant to be left closed, and some are simply meant to be watched.